Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive where we're going to be looking at educational assessments.
Okay.
We've got this cool document
Yeah.
called Types of Assessment Items, and it's kind of like the ultimate guide to figuring out, how educators decide what students have learned and,
Right.
like that.
Yeah. And why it matters, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about tests and quizzes. It's about
Right.
how we can design these learning experiences
Yeah.
that are really effective and make a difference.
So to kind of start us off, this document outlines like 6 main types of assessments.
Yeah.
Multiple choice, true, false, matching, short answer, essay.
Yes.
And then this one, that sounds really cool. Performance tasks?
Performance tasks. Yeah. This is where things get really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So imagine instead of just bubbling in answers on a multiple choice test about history,
Okay.
you're challenged to design a museum exhibit.
Oh, wow.
You're not just recalling facts. You're using them to create something new, something that brings the past to life.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves,
Right.
I think we should kind of break down each of these assessment types a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think we've all kind of encountered multiple choice questions,
Mhm.
true, false, matching at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
The bread and butter of testing,
yeah.
right? And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Think about a teacher with 100 students.
Right.
Multiple choice tests are super easy to grade,
Yes.
especially when you've got a ton of papers to get through.
Yeah.
But there's a catch. They might not be the best way to see if someone really understands, a complex topic.
So it's like I could ace a multiple choice test on climate change,
Yeah.
but not actually know anything about it.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah. You might pick burning fossil fuels and be right.
Right.
But in reality, it's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Deforestation, industrial processes, agriculture.
So many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple choice kind of oversimplifies it.
Yeah, it's like trying to understand a symphony
Right.
by just listening to one instrument.
Exactly.
We're missing out on,
The whole picture.
the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So I guess what stands out to you about this then, considering all the different assessment options?
It makes you think really carefully about what you're trying to measure.
Okay.
If you just want to know if someone can remember some facts,
Mm-hmm.
multiple choice is probably fine.
Okay.
But if you want to see if they can analyze, evaluate, make connections, you need a different approach.
It's like the difference between knowing the ingredients in a cake
Right.
and actually being able to bake one.
Exactly.
So, okay, if multiple choice isn't always the best, what about true, false, and matching?
Yeah.
They seem so straightforward.
They are. Yeah. They're designed to be simple.
Yeah.
They test, basic facts,
Mm-hmm.
but they have their limits too.
Okay.
Like with true false,
Yeah.
you have 50-50 chance of getting it right, even if you have no idea.
Right. Yeah.
And matching, sometimes you can just guess
Totally.
by eliminating answers. So they're easy to grade,
Yeah.
but they don't give you the full picture.
Okay. So I guess those types are kind of good for quick checks,
Right.
but maybe not for diving deep. What about short answer and essay questions?
Absolutely.
Those always felt like I had to actually use my brain more.
Yeah. Yeah. Short answer questions make you be concise and clear.
Mm-hmm.
Essays, you have to build an argument, analyze information,
Yeah.
draw your own conclusions.
And I remember the stress of those essay questions,
Right.
trying to make sure I hit all the key points and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see how they could be more open to interpretation when it comes to grading
Oh, yeah, definitely.
than a multiple choice test.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you've hit on a crucial point there. It brings us to reliability and validity and assessment.
Ooh.
Fancy terms.
Oh, no, right?
Break those down for us. What do reliability and validity even mean?
Okay. So think of reliability like baking a cake.
Okay.
If you follow the recipe exactly,
Mm-hmm.
you should get pretty much the same cake every time.
Right.
It's the same with assessments.
Yeah.
It's about consistency.
Okay.
So a reliable assessment will give you similar results each time,
Okay.
even if different teachers are grading it
Gotcha.
or a student takes it multiple times.
So it's if I took the same multiple choice test twice,
Yeah.
I should get roughly the same score.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, validity is about whether the test is actually measuring
Okay.
what it's supposed to measure.
Okay.
So imagine a medical test that gives consistent results,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't actually tell you anything about your health.
Right.
That wouldn't be very helpful.
No. Not about
So it's not just about being consistent.
Yeah.
It's about being accurate. So how does this then connect back to like different types of assessments?
Right.
Would a multiple choice test be like more reliable?
Yeah, so that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Multiple choice tests can be really reliable
Okay.
because the answers are very clear cut.
Hmm.
But if you're trying to assess like critical thinking
Yeah.
or creativity,
Okay.
an essay or a performance task might be more valid,
Okay.
even if it's harder to grade objectively.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
You would not.
And in the same way, you wouldn't just rely on multiple choice tests.
Right.
If you want to assess a student's ability to, apply knowledge
Yeah.
in real world situations.
Exactly. And that's where those performance-based tasks
Yeah.
really come in.
I'm very intrigued by these.
Yeah.
But before we dive into those,
Okay.
let's take a quick pause.
Sounds good.
And when we come back, we'll explore how educators actually design these effective assessments and why having a variety is so important.
Absolutely.
So stay with us.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were just talking about
Yeah.
how it's so important to choose the right assessment
Mm-hmm.
for what you're trying to measure.
Right. You wouldn't use a microscope
Right.
to study the stars.
Yeah, exactly. You need the right tool for the job.
You got it.
And it's not even just about, like, educators picking the right test.
Right.
It's about you as a learner understanding these tests.
Okay.
Like, you can change how you approach learning.
Oh, interesting. Okay. How's
It's like, think about those multiple choice questions we were talking about.
Yeah.
Knowing that they might not capture, like,
Okay.
the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
You can push yourself to go beyond just, like, memorizing the answer.
Okay.
Like, ask yourself, what are the nuances here?
Right.
What are the connections I'm not seeing?
So being more critical, more curious,
Exactly.
not just taking things at face value,
Yeah.
but really digging deeper.
Yeah. And when you see an essay question, you know that grading can be subjective.
Right.
That might make you want to, like, really work on your arguments.
Okay.
Make sure you have good evidence.
So you're not just trying to please the teacher.
Right.
You're trying to make
You're trying to build a case
a solid argument. Yeah.
that would stand up to scrutiny.
Oh, wow. So it's
Wow.
like you're becoming like an assessment ninja,
Exactly.
using this knowledge to your advantage.
Yeah. It's not just about passing the test. It's about using those assessments
Yeah.
as opportunities to learn and grow.
I love that. Okay, so let's look at some real world examples.
Okay.
Our document here, types of assessment items, dives into some really fascinating specifics.
It does.
Okay, so let's start with those like
Okay.
multiple choice questions. They're everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
What are some things educators should keep in mind when they're designing these?
Well, one key thing is to, like, avoid confusing language.
Okay.
You want the questions to be clear and concise.
Right. You don't want students getting tripped up
Exactly.
on the wording instead of the actual.
Yeah, you want to assess their understanding, not trick them
Gotcha.
with words.
Okay.
And then those incorrect answer choices,
Right.
the distractors,
Yeah.
they should be plausible, but, like, clearly wrong.
Okay.
So you want to make students really think
Yeah.
about why the right answer is right.
It's like a detective game.
It is.
You got to eliminate all the suspects,
Exactly.
but find the one clue.
Yeah, and then when it comes to essay questions, the key is to give, like, a really clear prompt
Okay.
to guide the student's thinking, but not be too restrictive.
Right. So give them some freedom.
Yeah, you want to give them space to express their own ideas.
What about grading those essays, though? How do you make sure it's fair?
Yeah, that's where rubrics come in.
Okay.
A well-designed rubric will lay out, like, all the criteria
Okay.
for evaluating the essay, like clarity of argument, use of evidence organization.
So it's not just based on the teacher.
Right, it's like a set of guidelines.
Yeah. Preferences.
Yeah, that everyone agrees on beforehand.
Okay, so moving on to those performance-based assessments that we keep mentioning,
Yes.
what makes them so special?
Well, remember that History Museum exhibit we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
That's a perfect example.
Okay.
Instead of writing a boring report about the Civil War,
Right.
the students could create an exhibit
Yeah.
that tells the story through, like, primary sources and artifacts and multimedia.
Wow, that's bringing history to life.
It is. It's about engaging students on a much deeper level,
Right.
making them active participants.
Okay, I'm sold on this.
Yeah.
But I can also see how this would be
Yeah.
a lot more work than just giving a traditional test.
You're right. Performance tasks can be complex.
Yeah.
So it's important to give them clear guidelines.
Okay.
Support them throughout the process.
So you're not just like throwing them into the deep end
Exactly.
and seeing if they can swim.
No, you got to give them the tools they need to succeed.
What about feedback then?
Yeah.
How does that differ for these performance assessments?
Well, just like any assessment, you want feedback to be timely and specific.
Okay.
But with performance tasks, it's especially important to focus on the process.
Not just the product.
Not just the final product, yeah.
Right.
So it's not just about whether the exhibit looks good,
Mm-hmm.
it's about how they got there, their
Mm-hmm.
research skills,
Yeah.
their collaboration.
Right. So all those skills that they're using.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And give them feedback that helps them understand how they learn best,
Yeah.
what their strengths are.
That makes me think about this idea of assessment literacy.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just educators who need to understand all this. If students understand how assessments work, they can kind of be more strategic about their learning.
Absolutely. Assessment literacy is so important
Yeah.
for both teachers and students.
It's like instead of seeing tests as this like scary judgmental thing,
Right.
you see them as like opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can make a huge difference for student motivation and engagement.
So let's go back to this idea of choosing the right assessment tool.
Okay.
Based on what you're trying to teach, can you give us some more examples?
Sure. So imagine you're teaching history
Okay.
and you want your students to be able to analyze primary sources.
Like letters and diaries?
Yeah, like letters and diaries from a certain time period.
Okay.
A multiple choice test is probably not going to cut it.
Right. You need something more in depth.
Yeah, you would want them to write an essay
Okay.
analyzing those sources,
Okay.
maybe looking at different perspectives.
Oh, or maybe they could even like create a dramatic performance.
Oh, yeah.
Or podcast episode
I love that that's the kind of creativity we want.
based on those sources. Yeah.
And the same goes for any subject.
Right.
If you're teaching math and you want to assess problem solving,
You wouldn't just give them equations.
you give them real world problems.
Where they have to apply.
Exactly. Concepts, yeah. It seems obvious,
It does.
but we often fall into that trap
We do.
of using familiar methods without thinking if they're the right fit.
You know what else would be really powerful?
What's that?
Getting the students involved in the process.
Oh, yeah.
Like asking them, how do you want to show what you've learned?
That's a great idea.
What kind of assessment would be meaningful for you?
Yeah, that's a game changer.
It gives them a voice.
Yeah, it does. It gives them ownership.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
Aligning assessments with goals, the power of student voice.
Yes.
What's next in our assessment adventure?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to zoom out
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture,
Okay.
how these different approaches to assessment impact the entire educational landscape.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back after a quick break to explore the future of assessments.
Good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we've been talking about all these different ways to assess learning,
Yeah.
from like those classic multiple choice tests.
To those more hands-on performance tasks.
Right. And we've talked about how important it is to choose the right kind of assessment
Yeah.
to match what you're trying to figure out.
Right. You wouldn't use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail.
Exactly.
So in this last part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I'm kind of curious about the bigger picture. How do these different assessment approaches impact education, like as a whole?
Well, think about the way we usually do testing.
Okay.
With all that memorization
Yeah.
and those big high-stakes exams,
Right.
it can create a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Make students feel like their whole worth is based on a single score.
Ooh. I remember those days cramming for tests.
Right.
And then like forgetting everything the minute it was over.
Exactly. And it doesn't exactly make you love learning, does it?
Yeah. Not really.
But imagine a system where assessments were like
Okay.
more engaging and authentic, you know,
Yeah.
relevant to students' lives.
Okay.
It's not about just getting the right answer anymore.
It's about applying that knowledge in different ways.
Okay.
Solving problems, showing what you know through projects or presentations.
So it's more about growth than grades.
Okay.
It's about mastering something, not just memorizing it.
And that shift
Yeah.
impacts the entire educational system
Okay.
when assessments are seen as chances to learn,
Yeah.
not just ways to evaluate. It changes everything.
So how does this actually play out in classrooms?
Well, for one thing, it encourages teachers to move away from that traditional lecture format.
Right. So less time talking at students.
Exactly. More time doing hands-on activities,
Okay.
group projects,
Mm-hmm.
real-world problem solving.
So the teacher is more like a facilitator.
Right.
than just like the holder of all knowledge.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where students are actually participating,
Yeah.
not just passively listening.
And I imagine this also changes how teachers give feedback.
It does.
If it's more about growth than grades, it becomes more about guidance and support.
Exactly. It's about helping them figure out
Yeah.
what they're good at and where they can improve.
So it's less about like judging them and more about helping them develop.
Right.
It's about nurturing that love of learning.
Yes, and that can have such a big impact on their self-esteem and motivation.
I bet.
When students feel supported,
Yeah.
they're more likely to take risks
Yeah.
and to try new things.
And to keep going even when things get tough.
Exactly. It's about fostering that growth mindset.
That idea that you can always learn more.
Yes, no matter where you start.
Okay, so something else to think about is how these different assessment approaches
Yeah,
can impact equity and access.
right, because those traditional standardized tests,
Yeah.
they've been criticized for, like,
Right.
making inequality worse.
Because they favor students
Huh.
who come from more privileged backgrounds.
Exactly. They have more resources and opportunities.
And those tests often measure more than just knowledge,
Right, they measure things like
test-taking skills
yeah, test-taking skills.
or cultural capital.
Yeah, which can be influenced by all sorts of things.
Yeah, so when assessments are more diverse,
Right.
more authentic, and more performance-based,
Yeah.
it can make things more fair.
It gives students from all backgrounds a chance to show what they can do.
So we're looking at lots of different kinds of evidence, not
Yeah.
just one test score.
Portfolios, projects, presentations.
It's about recognizing that intelligence is multifaceted.
Exactly.
I'm also thinking about how technology plays into all of this.
Yeah.
It seems like it could both help and complicate things.
It really can. Technology has opened up so many possibilities.
Like what?
Well, we have online platforms now, simulations, adaptive testing,
Wow.
all sorts of tools that can make assessments
Okay.
more engaging, more personalized.
But are there any downsides?
We have to be careful about how we use technology.
Right.
We need to think about data privacy and algorithmic bias.
Because we don't want to create a system where some students have an advantage just because they have access to better technology.
It's about using technology to make things more equitable.
Yeah, not to create more barriers.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
I hope they remember that assessment isn't just about giving grades. It's about helping students learn.
Yes. And that there are lots of different ways to assess learning.
Right. And each one has its own pros and cons.
So it's about picking the right tool for the job.
Exactly. You want the assessment to match
Yeah.
what you're trying to teach.
And to get students involved.
Absolutely. Make them part of the process.
Assessment should be a collaborative thing.
Yeah, it should help students grow.
This has been such a fascinating conversation.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of educational assessment.
Me too. It's a field that's always changing.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see how all these new approaches are shaping the future of education.
Absolutely.
So I guess the main takeaway here is that assessment is more than just measuring what students know.
Right. It's about helping them learn and grow.
It's about fostering a love of learning that will stay with them.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening, everyone.